So thanks for joining me on this second video blog that I'm seeking to put together. This is the barn where we offload at the end of the day. All the rubbish goes over there. My friend Stephen works with wood over there, and this in the winter months we'd light the fire. And, I work a lot of the time by myself, and that sometimes is okay, and sometimes actually it's quite difficult. So it's great to have a little base back here where one or two of us, along with Chris, my son-in-law, we can occasionally hook up and chew the cud and have a bit of a laugh. And so this has been my life on the farm these last 9 years. And as I was alluding to yesterday, this has been the place where I suppose my little life has imploded, and a lot of the things I thought were a given have been shaken to the core. And I know we all go through these seasons, but somehow being down here on the farm and the wildness of it, and at times the chaos of it, in a very unbounded place in a way, it sort of seemed to underline the challenge of it all. And probably the first and foremost area where my life just, our lives hit the wall was financially. I think in our culture it's not easy to talk about debt. It's probably easier to talk about bereavement and death than it is to talk about debt. It's a big taboo subject. But the reality is we went on some great adventures those years gone by into the Middle East, and just saw some doors open, and it seemed, and I know the Holy Spirit was all over what we were pressing into, but we lost some serious dosh in that Jeddah Gate, and we were in no situation to lose anything. So it really was a body blow, the like of which I'd never known before. I think I'd made the mistake of realising that just because the Holy Spirit is with you, and the invitation is there, and that doesn't necessarily guarantee success, because perhaps the measure of success and failure in heaven is different to that which we carry ourselves. So a lot of the years down here I've been coming to terms with the reality of that and the challenge of that, and at times a sense of, dear God, have we been abandoned? Is there a way back from this point? As a dad carrying a lot of responsibility, and in that, I think the shame of it was probably the by far the greatest emotion and the greatest issue I had to work through. Just the shame of being at the age I'm at, and yet not having perhaps everything tied down and sorted as perhaps you would expect people to be at this sort of age. And obviously the responsibility of the girls weighed heavily. And it wasn't really until I got the revelation that shame was actually all tied into my ego. It was about what I perceived other people to think about me. When I realised that I nailed that issue, I really began to walk free from it, and begin to stand up again into myself, and that's been a good journey, and we're taking ground on that debt, and we're not through it yet, but we've taken enough ground to begin to see some light at the end of the tunnel, which is unbelievable, given, you know, I'm just a little gardening boy, and Kathy, my wife, does bits and bobs, but that's about it really. So financially, then just the whole experience of being a tenant. I've dabbled in property over the years. I know what it is to be a landlord, but I've never experienced what it is to be a tenant, and it is a completely different scenario. Because you're not in control, and we've been so blessed by Oliver and Julie Stanley. They've been great landlords to us, and they've opened up space for us here, which we will always be grateful for. But I can't pretend that it's a completely different experience when you're not king of your own castle. And you can't just shape things as you want to shape them. And so just turning into that one, that whole disempowering thing has been a new experience for me. And I reckon, you know, if every landlord had to go through the experience of being a tenant, I know that we'd have a whole lot better landlords across the country, because I know I'm a much better landlord than I ever was for having been through this experience. And then relationally, over the years, I got so caught up in the adventures we were on, and tracking with what was opening up. I put my hands up and say I neglected my friendships here in Leeds, and when I eventually landed back in the city, I made assumptions that I had no right to make, and you know, one of my regrets is that I didn't give attention to some of the friendships that have really mattered over the years. Not that there's been any great falling out, but obviously people move on, and it's right that they do. And so to come into that vacuum, and being a city boy, to end up down the bottom of a farm track, like, you know, Billy No Mates in a sense, was unnerving. And I think us guys of my sort of age, you know, our friendships are hard won, because we don't easily share of ourselves. And so to have nowhere to hide in that whole experience was a challenge. And then lastly, if I can be so bold, my little world for a short period imploded sexually. Oh dear, I can't believe I'm saying this, but Loughton's got a limp willy, I suppose, is the nursery rhyme that will go up. Well, perhaps you can rest assured that actually he's doing very well. Thank you very much. But you just have to take my word for that one. But if you ever wanted evidence that the emasculation was complete, then it really was that. And so I've often said in years gone by, that the Holy Spirit never drops the pen on our story. In those days of tracking with stories from the street, and so on and so forth. But I have to say here, it felt as if he had dropped the pen. We had such a wonderful story. It spanned nations. It went to the other side of the world. We walked through some of the most incredible global cities, as some of you will know. And yet, to be at the bottom of the track in a sea of debt, and just a huge level of responsibility shook me to the core. But one thing I held on to was the knowledge that if we're willing to face into the pain, if we're willing to face into the reality of what's happening, then there's always the opportunity to write a fresh chapter. If not to have the final word, to maybe have another word. And I suppose these little video blogs are an expression of that maybe at last I'm just beginning to find my voice, and that's because I'm beginning to come out the other side. So thanks for joining me on this little blog. I hope it's been helpful for anyone out there who identifies with just some of the things I've shared. I just want to encourage you just to hold in and hold into the place of pain. No, you're not a masochist, but there's integrity in that place. There's reality in that place, and there's a way through in that place, and we're finding a way through, and we're coming out of this season so much stronger, so much more grounded than I've ever been in the rest of my life. And whilst at times I've wondered whether in actual fact I would come through with my mental health intact. I now know that I am, and for Kathy, her physical health, but I also know for Kathy, she too is coming through, and so that's a good story. That is a good story. I can have a bit more of that. So there we have it. The red kites are just gliding in front of me. Little robin hopping around. Every gardener has several robins. They are great companions. I hope you've enjoyed this little blog, and maybe more in a couple of days.